Hi, folks. It's Steve. I am here again with another freedom fighter, and it is Rachel Abramovitz. Rachel, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. Let's start out this way. Please explain to us why freedom is so important to you that you've decided to take a stand to fight to protect it.
Well, many years ago when I decided to go to law school, human rights was, I would say, the most interesting topic under that umbrella. I didn't end up practicing in that area, but I came closer as I became more involved in issues around clinical research and consent and informed consent. And for many years, I sat on the IRB for NYU, the ethics committee overseeing clinical research in humans. And my legal practice brought me closer to that area and the FDA regulatory compliance issues involved and guidelines for Office for Human Research protections. So this was an area that I had become close to in my practice before the beginning of the pandemic. And when the pandemic hit, I was called by a client of mine from New York to ask what we could possibly do to protect the patient that were disappearing into hospitals for weeks, a week or more. And, the family wasn't hearing anything. And then we're getting a call just to say the patient had passed away. There was never any informed consent for any of the treatments or any of the protocols used on these patients. I became very involved in the issue of patient rights. And all my work since then is pro bono, either to protect the basic patient rights or other medical freedoms that also are connected, because a patient right is also a basic human right. In other words, you can't withhold food and water from anyone, not just a patient. And this was done. People were denied food, were denied fluids based on protocols used by the hospitals, and denied their right to informed consent and participate in their treatment plan. They were denied the right to be released. Patients begged to go home and were not permitted to go home. Many issues were reported, and I notified all authorities possible under the sun. Some guidelines were issued by Office for Human Research, Office for Civil Rights of the Department of Health and Human Services. Other guidelines were issued by the Department of Health of New York. For the most part, the hospitals ignored them, and they continue to do so. So our basic patient rights are also, I believe, basic human rights.
Wow, you're a powerhouse. Where did this come from? This passion and this strength to fight for human rights?
Well, I think it's based in faith. First of all, I believe, that a life is a precious gift from God, and no human doctor otherwise has a right to take someone else's life. We should pass away when it's our time to pass. So I object to the protocols that were used to force patients, for example, to be ventilated, and then they were extubated. The ventilator was taken out and it was turned off without consent of the family, basically putting patients to death. These types of things, I believe, are crimes against humanity because they were done on massive scales based on protocols rolled out to hospitals, not just in the US, but around the world. Withholding of potentially life saving treatments. I believe these are our basic rights given to us by God, and interference by humans in our basic rights is not okay. And for that reason, I have a duty to fight on behalf of those who need assistance to protect their rights that were given to them. I do believe I am a servant of God. I get jobs from Him, and I do my best to do a good job when I get a job from Him.
Can you relate to the idea that you have been called by God to take a stand?
For sure. I mean, my entire life was building up, I feel, in many ways, to the moment when I was called to take a stand. because I have, I lived in various different places and have, I'm admitted to practice in different jurisdictions. And so, everything we do in life, adds a bit of knowledge, a bit of experience. So, I was already aware of medical tyranny in the United States before the pandemic hit. I was aware of issues of medical kidnap of children by doctors and hospitals to force chemotherapy, for example, on children without their consent and without parents' consent. So this is not new. It just became extremely normalized and widespread with the pandemic.
I see, and I've heard this before about people doing God's work, and it becomes interesting to people. So I'm going to ask you, how exactly did God call you? How does he give you this mission?
Well, I would say, it came through one of my clients, an ultra orthodox gentleman from upstate New York, who called me on a Friday afternoon and said, "We have to do something." And I said, "Okay, let me think about it. I don't know what kind of rights patients have in hospitals. I'll call you after Shabbat." And he said, "No, we have to work on it on Shabbat. This is pikuach nefesh. We have to save lives. These are people are being, they're being killed in the hospitals." And at that moment, I was in shock that he said that we needed to work on it on Shabbat, and that was the shocker for me. That
So
brought me
the
into the fight.
so the idea of pikuach nefesh, the idea of saving a soul, gave you the idea that this was an extraordinary mission.
Certainly, it was clear to me as soon as I became involved that we were saving lives. I worked closely with many community leaders, and everyone worked on Shabbat when necessary. We had calls, we had meetings. It was for about a month. I worked around the clock for the first month.
Wow. You mentioned about how the positions you're taking in defense of your clients and other patients are a direct challenge to the way the medical establishment was conducting business. You must have faced a lot of flack and more.
Oh yeah, I was threatened by one CEO of a certain hospital system in New York that if I or any of my associates ever contacted any one of his employees in his hospital again, he would report me to the bar for daring to say that patients had rights.
So how did you handle that?
I ignored it. I consulted with two very prominent attorneys, and they told me, "Don't worry about it, just ignore it." So I did.
And so it was an idle threat. He didn't do anything to you.
He didn't do anything. I did not continue to work with that hospital specifically, with that system. I did not continue with any, I had to be very careful because no one was doing anything. Everyone was afraid to say anything. It was, oh, the hospitals and the doctors are the heroes. We can't criticize them. Um, and there was things like an individual, a patient wanted a certain religious item to say his daily prayers. I called a chaplain to say, "Hey, what's the problem? Why can't he get that?" And I was told, "Well, they're afraid, it's not clean." And I said, "How about a new pair wrapped in a plastic package, sterilized?" And he's like, "That's a great idea." 20 minutes later, I was called by the patient's family to back off and never mentioned that word again, and that the nurses were talking, and that the lawyer was involved, and they were afraid that the patient would be retaliated against.
Wow. That must have enraged you.
I mean, the letter that I got from the CEO of that hospital system threatening me to report me to the bar, that's I was shocked, to be honest. It took me like a couple days to recover. It was a virulent attack on me. Really nasty.
What did you learn about where these people are coming from? How would somebody who's supposed to manage a healthcare system, how could he turn into such a devil? What drove him?
Psh, I don't know. I mean, I had a video call once with the general counsel of a different hospital in New York and her assistant general counsel. And at the end of the call, she said, "You know, Rachel, we have very different ideas about what patient rights are." I was like, yeah, that's for sure.
Can you attribute malevolent intent to her ideas? I mean,
They just don't care. I mean, it's I think that they're all the hospitals are basically, they post patient bill of rights on their website, but then they turn around and ignore it all. They think that they can issue administrative policies that will dictate, and they do this to the doctors, what to prescribe and how to treat patients with certain diseases. Whereas actually, doctors have a fiduciary duty toward their patient to always do what's in the best interest of the patient. So the hospitals are getting in the way of that doctor patient relationship. They're tying the hands of the doctor and forcing them to betray their fiduciary duty toward the patient. Um, it's a very interesting situation. The hospitals really turned into prisons. They basically turned into prisons. They didn't let anyone in for a while at all. You had no idea what's going on. They had ridiculous rules like coming from the CDC to separate. They would test mothers after giving birth, and even if the mother tested negative for coronavirus before giving birth, they would test her again after, and if she tested positive after, take the baby away for 14 days. This is CDC guideline online. You can look it up. That was their rule. Take the baby away for 14 days. And they wouldn't even let you have like a video connection with the baby. I mean, what kind of damage are they doing and who? And this is the CDC. It's rotten. The corruption goes very deep. It's throughout all of the three-letter organ, the CDC, the FDA. It's all been corrupted through money influences. And so it's horrific, really. But who's writing these protocols? Where are they coming from? How come the protocols were the same all over the world almost? You know, Coming from World Health Organization, probably, maybe elsewhere, and we don't know. There's no transparency.
I get this. You made a reference to doctors allegedly being heroes. Were you raised to believe that doctors were heroes?
I was raised to believe that doctors would protect me from death, the scary death, fear. Fear is the what's used to control us, very much so. So we're taught to fear death, and the only one that can save us from death is the doctor. So follow the doctor's orders, But I don't follow doctor's orders. Sorry.
So this whole experience in fighting for patient rights with the scamdemic, um, that has that helped you overcome your fear of death? I mean, if they can't protect you, do you feel like the only person that can protect me is myself?
I mean, I think it's strengthened my faith that I'm not afraid because when it's my time, it'll be my time. And it's a test of faith, really. And, I think that everyone who calls themselves people of faith, including many dear family members who ran to get vaccinated, for example, because they fear death. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. So, where's your faith? Do you not believe that God will take you at your time? You know, I also don't believe in, organ transplant plants. I don't think it's possible to do organ transplants in a truly ethical way. After researching it further, it's come to my attention that it's really not possible to do it ethically. And if you think about it again, where's your faith? Why do you think you need to extend for if you ruined your organs, I mean, so that was your choice. It's all about freedom of choice. This whole life is about freedom of choice. You have free will. You decide to be healthy or not healthy, take care of everybody or not take care of everybody. Yes, sometimes unfortunate people have diseases, and I'm not saying that my decision is right for everyone, but if you really research the organ transplant business, you'll find that it's very difficult to ensure that it is ethical because they have to take the heart out when it's beating. Otherwise, it's not worth anything.
Hmm. What sources do you use on a regular basis to strengthen your faith?
I mean, I pray daily, and connect with God and ask for guidance, and inevitably, it does come. And as I said, I get some jobs to do, and it's pretty clear who's giving them to me. I don't do the work I do for money; it's all pro bono. My medical freedom work is all pro bono.
Really?
Yes,
Is that a deliberate choice?
yes.
Why?
Also for protection. In other words, when in my interactions with hospital administrators, etc., if I had been doing the work I was doing for pay, I think they might have come after me. But I made it clear that everything I was doing pro bono. And I think it gave me a certain amount of protection. And also, I like to say that, when you work for God, you get employee benefits and protection.
That's well said. What's your support system like? Who are your allies? Who do you have in mind when you um who do you go to when you reach a low point for some renewed strength?
Well, first of all, for sure, to the Almighty. When I feel empty, I ask Him to help me, give me strength. Or sometimes you have to just rest a bit and leave it to Him. Okay, I'm giving up now. You take over. If you're advocating for a patient and you're trying to get them out of the hospital before they get murdered, to be quite honest, in the hospital. But at some point, you've done everything you could possibly do. Then you have to let Him take over.
Absolutely. Any people in your life that also give you strength?
For sure, my children. I have also many pets that give me comfort. I have a lot of cats and a dog that thinks she's a cat. And pets can help lower blood pressure. I like to say, if someone annoys me, I go pet my cat.
Seriously. Um, let's fast forward to the future. Um, how do you want to be remembered by whoever, all of us who are remembering, who will think back on these days? When we think of Rachel, what do you want us to think about you?
Well, I thought sometimes it would be nice to be remembered as the mother of patient rights.
That would be a most noble legacy, I have to say. So this is your life work. You will spend the rest of your life and career establishing that legacy?
Well, it certainly is an integral part of my career at this point. I do at least $50,000 a year of pro bono work in patient rights and medical freedom for people that need help. Um, I shifted a little bit to the vaccine mandates and injuries because the patient rights issue became a little less urgent as the hospitals opened up at least part of the day for a few hours a day to let people in. And once there are people in, they have to change their behavior because their people are seeing what they're doing. So that was why I was calling for observers in the hospitals for the first couple of months of the pandemic, because no one could knew what was even going on unless there was a few people that snuck in and got some video. And the reports were horrific. The reports were of patients behind wooden doors, locked, yelling and screaming for help, and the nurses sitting around laughing, having lunch. Yeah. One other hospital, I spoke to the general counsel of that hospital, and I told her what I had heard was being reported. I told her, you need to do an investigation. And she later spoke to me one more time, and she told me she put video cameras in the patient rooms as a result of the conversation that I had with her.
Good
So
for her.
thanks, God, something happened.
Have you found that there are, have you been surprised at how many people like her would wake up as opposed to remaining woke and try to become part of the solution as opposed to the problem?
I mean, I think there are people who are more open, and there are people who are just evil, you know. Some of them are just, it won't help. Nothing will help. Others want to do the right thing, but their hands are tied, or well, we have to be able to run the hospital. Um, yeah, that's you being able to run the hospital does not trump basic patient rights. And CMS is to blame also because they waived all our patient rights in the beginning of the pandemic. People weren't even aware. They waived all the patient rights and allowed the hospitals to isolate the patients without normally isolation of patients and also restraint, by the way, because many times patients are also restrained when they're on a vent and other, so they don't pull the vent out. They have to restrain their wrists. So they're restrained and isolated in a room. No one's in there with them under the CMS regulations. If you The only time you would do that would be with a psychiatric patient. So all of the regs were in the psychiatric part of the regs. But you're supposed to check face to face every hour to make sure they're okay. But these patients were not checked. They would be left for 6 to 12 hours at a time. Patients who weren't vented but were too weak to eat, food would be dropped off in front of them and then taken away a few hours later untouched because they were too weak to eat. So they, you know, it's, as I said, basic patient rights, water, food, family at the bedside 24/7. I mean, if you need help with activities of daily living, which you usually do when you're in a hospital bed, you need help going to the bathroom, you need help eating, drinking, you need someone at the bedside. And denying someone that is potentially signing their death certificate.
Boy, have you seen a lot. Um,
Yes.
let's wrap up this way. Let's suppose that we're in a room of 300 people, fellow attorneys, who are kind of interested in what you're saying, kind of aware that there's been a problem. And one of them stands up and says, Rachel, I don't want to see what you've seen. I don't want to hear what you've heard, but I know I have to do something. What would you say to that person to give them strength and encourage them to get into the game, get off the bench and into the game?
Well, I mean, if you want to get off the bench and into the game, you have to be ready to see and hear some things. And it is hard. It's very hard, as we all know from the last 2 weeks, of what happened in Israel. It's sometimes very hard to see and hear things. Um, and so if you're not ready, then I would say stay on the sideline and just support in other ways. But if you really want to get in to the issue, there are it's important for patients to understand their rights to go into a hospital with the patient advanced directives written, so at least the hospitals put on notice of what they agree and don't agree to have done. Um, and there are other things that can be done. If you can't have someone at the bedside, you can use like a well tablet to stay in touch constantly, because being in a hospital without an is life threatening, especially now after what's happened. But it was always like that. It was always, you always needed someone with you in the hospital
For
at the end
sure.
of the day. Yeah.
Well, Rachel, you have certainly done a few things for us. You've shined a very bright light on the atrocities that take place, that have taken place. You've also, with your story, shown how strong people can be, and you've shown the role of faith. So many of the freedom fighters have a faith, and that empowers them. Um, So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for sharing your strength and for putting the spotlight where we need to look. And I want to thank you for being there. And I wish you much success in your
Thank you.
life mission. I'm not even going to call it your life work. It's your life mission because I see that's what it is. And I wish you many blessings to come.
Thank you so much. Blessings
You're
to you
welcome.
too. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.